My uncle raised his glass at the gala and announced, "The Lane fortune, $42 million, is officially in my name." The crowd erupted in applause. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. No one noticed my fingernails digging into my palm or how my heartbeat drowned out the music. They thought I was powerless, cornered, erased from my own bloodline, but I wasn't. What none of them knew was that every handshake, every forged document, every smug laugh of theirs had already been recorded. Tonight wasn't their victory. It was the last night they'd ever stand on a stage without fear. My name is Clara Lane, the last daughter of the Lane family. To the outside world, the Lanes are old money, the type of dynasty that built cities and funded wars. Our crest still hangs over the courthouse downtown. But behind the marble halls and crystal chandeliers, there's rot, jealousy, betrayal, greed wrapped in velvet gloves. When my father died, he left me what he always called our shield, the Lane legacy, worth $42 million in shares, estates, and bonds. It wasn't just wealth. It was history, power, reputation. It was meant to be mine. But that night, under the strobe of chandeliers and the echo of champagne glasses, my Uncle Vincent paraded himself as the new heir. He called me too young, too soft, unfit to lead. And the papers, my father's will, vanished. Everyone nodded, whispered, applauded. To them, it was settled. I kept silent, my face calm, my eyes lowered like a dutiful niece. Inside, I was a storm, because Vincent didn't know me. He didn't know about the years I'd spent in the Army's intelligence branch. He didn't know how discipline can turn grief into steel. And he certainly didn't know that while he gloated over his glass of vintage Bordeaux, I was already playing the final act of a plan he would never escape. The night my father first told me about the Lane legacy, we were standing in his study. Books towered around us like soldiers, and the smell of old leather and cigar smoke lingered in the air. "Clara," he said, his voice slow, deliberate, "our family is built on more than money. It's honor. And when I'm gone, it's yours to guard." I was 21 then, barely out of uniform after my first deployment. I remember smiling, proud, but also a little uneasy, because I knew Vincent was listening from the doorway. Vincent had always been the shadow at our table, my father's younger brother, charming on the surface, but hungry in ways that made the skin on my arms prickle. He never built anything of his own. He only circled, waiting. That was the night I first caught his eyes, not on me, but on the keys my father held to the family vault. Years later, when my father grew ill, Vincent made his move. He whispered to board members, courted lawyers, bought loyalty with expensive wine and discreet envelopes. I was away on assignment when the first betrayal happened. The trust fund diverted, a signature forged. By the time I returned, my father was gone. The will, too. In its place stood Vincent, smiling like he had earned it all. But the mistake he made was underestimating me. He thought I was still the obedient niece, the soldier who followed orders. He didn't see the woman who had studied human weakness in war zones, who knew how to turn silence into strategy. He stole my $42 million inheritance with lawyers and shadows, but I would take it back with something far sharper: truth, precision, and one night that would make history repeat itself on my terms. Vincent didn't just take the money. He took the house where I was raised, the vineyard my grandfather planted, even the foundation my mother built for war widows. I'll never forget the day I walked up to the Lane estate, suitcase still in my hand from overseas. The gates, once open for me, stayed closed. The guard, our old gardener now wearing a new uniform, looked at me with pity. He said, "I'm sorry, Miss Clara. Orders from Mr. Vincent." That word, Mr. Vincent, it hit me harder than any battlefield. Inside, he was throwing a party. Music spilled through the walls, glasses clinked, people laughed as if nothing sacred had been stolen. I could see through the iron bars Vincent standing on the balcony, his hand resting on the mahogany railing that had been carved by my grandfather's own hands. He raised a glass and toasted to his victory, while I stood outside like a stranger. From that day, it wasn't just theft, it was humiliation. He stripped my access to the accounts. The foundation collapsed within months, leaving dozens of widows without support. Reporters called it mismanagement, but I knew it was deliberate. He wanted my father's legacy tied to ruin so that the Lane name belonged only to him. One evening, he sent me a letter, a single line, written in that arrogant scrawl I had known since childhood. "Some wars you can't win, Clara. Walk away before I bury you with the past." He thought a threat would scare me, but all it did was sharpen the edge of my resolve. I didn't respond. I didn't scream, didn't fight in the open. I let him believe he had crushed me. Meanwhile, I started digging quietly. Old allies from the army who knew how to track movements without being seen. Lawyers who owed me favors. A retired investigator who hated men like Vincent more than I did. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Offshore accounts, shell companies, backroom deals with people my father would have never allowed within 10 miles of our home. The theft wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, power, legacy. And if Vincent wanted a war over the Lane name, then he would have it. Revenge, like war, requires patience. I learned that in the desert when every move had to be calculated, every step measured against the risk of landmines. Taking back my family's $42 million legacy wouldn't happen with rage or impulse. It had to be precise, surgical. One strike that could not be undone. First, I built my team. Marcus, a former signals intelligence officer, had an ear for encrypted communications. He owed me after I dragged him out of an ambush in Kandahar. He became my eyes and ears, combing through Vincent's offshore transactions. Then there was Leela, a sharp corporate lawyer with a taste for blood when it came to dismantling corrupt empires. She had been disbarred once for pushing too far, but in this war, too far was exactly what I needed. And finally, Colonel Jensen, retired, who had been like a second father to me. He didn't say yes immediately. He just looked at me for a long time and finally asked, "Clara, are you willing to burn it all, even your own name, to win this?" I answered without hesitation, yes. Because sometimes to reclaim a legacy, you must become the fire that scorches the earth. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, extraction. Marcus traced Vincent's shell corporations and funneled funds back to a central holding he believed was untouchable. What Vincent didn't know was that his own greed made him sloppy. He left trails that a soldier's discipline could follow. Phase 2, exposure. Leela prepared dossiers, contracts, wire transfers, private memos. We tied every theft to his name, every lie to his signature. But exposure alone wasn't enough. Vincent was too powerful, too entrenched. Phase 3, execution. This wasn't about courts or headlines. It had to be one decisive night, a single strike where he couldn't recover. We chose the charity gala he was hosting, a spectacle meant to crown him as the heir of the Lane Empire. Politicians, bankers, even foreign investors would be there. The perfect audience. But there was one risk I hadn't planned for. Vincent knew me too well. I rehearsed every detail, the timed release of documents, the encrypted broadcasts that would play across the ballroom screens, the hidden allies stationed at every corner of the estate. But I also knew Vincent. He wasn't the type to let a ghost from the past ruin his coronation quietly. He would fight, claw, and, if necessary, destroy everything, including me. So I prepared for that, too. I trained harder, sharper, as if the battlefield had only shifted from sand to marble floors. Every move, every contingency mapped out in my head like war plans spread across a tent. The night of reckoning was approaching, and when it came, there would be no second chances. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in velvet and deceit. The Lane estate gleamed like a palace, crystal chandeliers, polished marble, and a garden lit with strings of golden lights. Guests spilled from black cars, tuxedos sharp, gowns dazzling, cameras flashing. To the world, Vincent was about to ascend as the rightful heir. But I knew the truth. Tonight would be his downfall. I walked through the service entrance wearing the uniform of catering staff, black jacket, white gloves. My reflection in the silver trays was unrecognizable. That anonymity was my shield. My comms earpiece buzzed.
Phase 1 complete, Marcus whispered. I'm in his system. Files are ready to detonate on your signal. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with laughter and clinking glasses. A string quartet played something light and charming, but beneath it all, my heartbeat was a drum of war. Every smile in that room was a mask, and mine hid the sharpest blade. I passed through the crowd unnoticed, slipping past senators, CEOs, and old family acquaintances who once pitied the daughter who lost it all. They didn't see me now. They would. At the center of it all stood Vincent, immaculate in his tailored suit, champagne glass raised as he charms the cameras. My brother, my betrayer. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we honor the future of the Lane legacy, a future built on vision, strength, and lies, I murmured under my breath. My cue was approaching. Leela had positioned herself near the podium with documents ready, and Marcus hovered over the digital trigger. The plan was simple: expose everything live, in front of the entire elite who once adored him. But just as I was about to signal Marcus, my earpiece crackled. Clara, problem. He's running a counter-program. Someone's in my system. If I trigger now, it backfires on us. Damn, Vincent had anticipated me. He always did. In war, no plan survives contact with the enemy. I adjusted fast. Stall, I ordered. I stepped closer to the stage, slipping into the throng of admirers. My hand brushed the hidden drive inside my jacket pocket. Plan B, manual exposure. If the digital strike failed, I'd plant the evidence directly into the ballroom screens. But then, Vincent's eyes caught mine. He froze, mid-sentence. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. He knew. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we also celebrate family. My sister, Clara, has returned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Spotlight beams swung toward me like searchlights on a battlefield. Dozens of faces turned.
He was drawing me into the open. I forced a smile, stepping forward. Yes, Vincent, I've returned. My voice carried through the microphone he deliberately handed me. My pulse was steady, ice in my veins. I slid the hidden drive into the podium's control port. Marcus's voice came back, excited. Connection reestablished. I can override from here. The screens flickered. At first, it was Vincent's carefully curated montage of family photos, smiling, perfect. Then, documents, wire transfers, recorded calls, contracts stamped with his signature. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the crackle of the sound system. Vincent's face darkened. He lunged toward me, hissing under his breath. You think you've won? You're still the weak one. I'll bury you tonight. He wasn't bluffing, because his guards were already moving in. The plan was unraveling. I had one shot left to survive the chaos and finish what I'd started. The ballroom froze, heavy with silence, except for the faint crackle of the screens replaying my brother's treachery. Every transfer, every fake signature, every stolen dollar now hung in the air like a death sentence. Vincent's polished facade crumbled, his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, and in that instant, he wasn't the charming heir, he was the predator I had always known. "Turn it off," he barked at the technicians. But Marcus was already 3 steps ahead. Every attempt to kill the feed only amplified the files, projecting them onto every wall, every monitor. Guests gasped as the mountain of evidence poured out, a storm of betrayal. The empire he built on lies was burning before his very eyes. Vincent grabbed my arm hard, yanking me off the podium. His smile stayed plastered on for the cameras, but his voice was venom in my ear. "You think you've won? You're still the weak one. I'll bury you tonight." He wasn't bluffing, because his guards were already moving in.
Is real. He forged our father's will. He stole the $42 million meant to build schools, hospitals, and futures. He buried me to crown himself. And tonight, I bury him with the truth. A murmur spread like wildfire through the room. Investors whispered, journalists scribbled, cameras turned. The weight of their gazes shifted from me to him. Judgment, suspicion, fury. For the first time, Vincent wasn't untouchable. But predators don't go quietly. He shoved the podium aside, grabbing a glass of champagne and smashing it against the edge. Jagged stem clutched like a weapon. Security guards surged forward, but he waved them off, glaring at me. "You always wanted my crown. Come take it." I didn't flinch. The years of fear, of hiding, of silence, they ended here. Lila appeared at my side, sliding a small recorder into my palm. "Play it," she whispered. I hit the button. Vincent's own voice filled the ballroom. "She'll never rise again. Once I have the business, Clara is nothing but a ghost." The crowd erupted, shocked gasps, muttered curses. Reporters stormed forward. This was more than evidence. This was confession. Vincent lunged, glass raised, but the security guards finally intervened. They tackled him hard to the ground, the sharp edge of the glass shattering harmlessly on marble. He thrashed, spitting, "You're nothing without me. This legacy is mine." I stepped forward, looking down at him with the calm he could never break. "No, Vincent. You stole a fortune, but you lost the one thing you can never buy back. Honor." And the cameras caught every word. The guards dragged him away, his threats echoing behind us, but his reign was finished. In a single night, his empire turned to dust. The guests parted as I walked off the stage. No one sneered, no one whispered in pity. Instead, they watched in silence, some nodding, others clapping softly, as if a queen had just claimed her rightful throne. Marcus's voice came through the earpiece, steady and proud. "You did it. The world knows. It's over." But I knew better. This was not the end. It was only the breaking point. The night the predator fell, the reckoning still awaited me. Because taking back $42 million was one thing. Taking back my life, that was just beginning. The morning after felt strangely quiet. The storm had passed, yet its echoes still lingered in every headline, every breaking news banner. Corporate heiress Clara Hayes exposes 42M fraud at gala. Vincent Hayes arrested for embezzlement and forgery. His face, once adored, now plastered across the front pages in disgrace. My name, once erased, finally spoken with respect. I sat by the window of my late father's study.
the place where Vincent first forged those papers, sunlight filtering through curtains he once drew shut. The leather chair still carried his scent of cigars and cedar. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an intruder here. This was my place. I had taken back the throne he tried to bury me from. But victory was not triumph. The $42 million he siphoned could not be magically restored overnight. Hospitals, half-built, stood abandoned. Children who should have been studying still worked the fields. His greed left scars that money alone could never heal. I knew then my fight wasn't about dollars. It was about destiny. So when the board convened to ask if I wished to sell what remained of the company, I stood tall and gave them the answer Vincent never would. No, we rebuild, not for profit, but for purpose. Gasps rippled through the room. Investors balked. But for every shareholder who left, 10 more supporters arrived, people who believed in something beyond dividends. Former employees returned, grateful for leadership with honor. Journalists followed, chronicling not the fall of Vincent, but the rise of Clara. His empire of lies had collapsed, but from the rubble, I built something stronger. Truth. Weeks later, I visited one of the abandoned hospitals. Children peeked at me from behind cracked walls, their eyes wide with both fear and hope. I knelt, meeting them at eye level, promising, "This will open again, and this time no one will take it away from you." It wasn't just a vow, it was redemption. For them, for me. Vincent, meanwhile, sat in a cold cell, awaiting trial. He had traded marble halls for concrete walls, power for chains. His letters begged me for forgiveness, claiming he had been blinded, manipulated, misunderstood. I read them once, then set them aflame. He had stolen too much to ever earn my pity. He thought I would remain his ghost. Instead, I became his shadow, the reminder he could never escape. On the anniversary of my father's death, I stood at his grave alone. No cameras, no board members, just me, the wind, and his name carved into stone. I thought losing everything meant I was powerless, but you were right, Father. Legacy isn't what they take from you, it's what you refuse to surrender. I placed a single white rose on the grave, the symbol of both mourning and renewal. And as I walked away, I felt the weight of the past slip from my shoulders. The world now saw me not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who reclaimed a stolen empire. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Because when you rise from the ashes of betrayal, you don't just take back what was stolen, you become unstoppable.